First of all, our reading glasses, it's a rite of passage for some of you, I know that. Not all of you. Anyway, isn't it wonderful to be in a whole room full of fellow warriors? John, when you went through everything you're doing, maybe it wasn't everything, but I have to say I was breathless. The number of things you're doing and how you're doing them, your successes, when you put it all together in that, it just totally overwhelming, and it's so wonderful to see. And that's why my wife Pat Trotcher and I are so proud to help support your team through the work you do. And the formation of, at the time when many thought freedoms and security were embedded in our Constitution, it's been actually under threat on many fronts, including a supposedly politically apolitical court system. Ladies and gentlemen, February 20th, 1972 was an important date in the fight for freedom in Canada. Ezra Levant was born into a Jewish family in Calgary on that day. And as we know all too well, for generations and at this very moment, Jewish people have been forced to fight for freedoms the rest of us take for granted. So it's not surprising that working against the erosion of freedoms has been a hallmark of Ezra's career. Ezra started his fight for freedom and he joined the Reform Party at the University of Calgary as a law student. He was called to the bar in 2000 and began practicing law, but soon ceased his practice after 2 years to pursue his real calling, political freedom. When he co-founded the Western Standard, he ran afoul of the Alberta Human Rights Commission for publishing those Muhammad magazine pictures. But he described his experience with the commission in a book called Shakedown, which was selected as the Writers' Trust Best Canadian Book of the last 25 years, Best Canadian Political Book of the last 25 years. Better? Sorry. You want me to start over? No. 10 years ago, Ezra asked me to apply my oil industry experience to help edit a book called Ethical Oil, the case for Canada's oil sands, which exposed the hypocrisy of autocratic regimes, hypocrisy of anti-oil sands activists, while autocratic regimes, including Russia, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq, were given free rein to import oil into the country. But Ezra's projects were never done, as we know. Rebel News just announced an update to the book that, quote, will show how much worse the world's dependence on conflict oil has become. That's just one part of Rebel's 2024 plan. Other projects include the following: the trucker convoy aftermath, battling the C-11 censorship bill, crime and chaos, the slow burn of gang-run drug camps, high immigration, a resurfacing discourse, and transgender madness. Tonight's award comes on the 9th anniversary of Rebel News. Ezra's team has grown from 1 to 20 and is now by far the most influential Canadian force for freedom. His dedicated reporters travel across Canada and around the world, focusing on evidence of anti-freedom persecution. But unfortunately, Rebel's courageous reporters have themselves become targets of persecution right here at home. Barred from reporting on political events allowed only mainstream media, they face appallingly rough treatment by police acting on government direction. A clear demonstration that we need Rebel News' freedom-fighting mission now, more than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege to introduce my friend and an outstanding Canadian, Ezra Levant.
So the 2024 Jonas Freedom Award presented to Ezra Levant.
Well, thank you very much. And you've been a hero of mine since I first met you in the Reform Party of Canada, about 30 plus years ago. And it takes some courage to be a reformer, to be a rebel, to be a dissident, to speak out against the dominant narrative. It especially takes courage for someone who has a lot to lose. Someone who is, if you have nothing, you have nothing to lose. But to have your station in the world of business and the world of politics, and yet to speak bravely about controversial subjects is a mark of character and courage. And I'm actually deeply touched that you would refer to me as a friend. And I thank you very much, and the feeling is mutual. Thank you. I want to say thank you to John Carpay, who has had a lonely battle, but it's not so lonely anymore. Look at this room full. You know, like so many other freedom fighters in Canada, sometimes John gets knocked down, but he gets right back up. Anyone can get knocked down, but can he get back up afterwards and fight for freedom again? John can, and there's very few who can say that. The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom sometimes is the only voice out there, and I thank you, and of course Rebel News supports the JCCF in so many ways. It's an honor to be given this award that has been won by incredible people. Canada's most prominent public intellectual, Jordan Peterson, to Mayor Leach, the spiritual leader of the trucker convoy, who, despite being imprisoned unjustly for 49 days, much of which was in solitary confinement, and then put through I'm not going to call it a sham trial, but I would certainly call it a show trial for a year now, still maintains her positive, but she's positively sweet. Put me in jail for 49 minutes, I'm coming out sour. It's just incredible to be in that list of people. You saw some others on the screen. I'm going to keep my remarks fairly brief, but I want to talk to you about something that I regard as a danger to all of us. I was thinking about, I think John talked about the order of freedom and justice, and I think about that a lot. I think freedom is the most important, and then I would put justice, and then I would put peace, and I would put prosperity last on that list, which is different than what I would have thought, 35 years ago when I was a young intern at the Fraser Institute, because I guess we had peace, and we had justice, and we had freedom, so I just thought about prosperity, and we learned about free market economics. But I look around the world today, and I think there are certain things that are much more valuable, much more fundamental than just free market economics. And if you look at the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the list of fundamental freedoms, it's in a very particular order that's very thoughtful. And I know Premier Peckford, who's an outstanding supporter of the JCCF here, he'll correct me or he'll fill in my gaps here. The order of precedence of the freedoms that makes sense. The freedom of thought and belief comes first, and the freedom of religion, freedom of expression. You can't have that if you don't have freedom of thought. And then only with that you have freedom of assembly and freedom of association. It goes sort of in order. And I believe that those are in peril now. Put another way, what use is a free election if you don't have freedom of speech? So you need those core protections first before you can worry about other things. In the last 2 weeks in the United Kingdom, we've seen hundreds of people jailed, some for violent riots, but some for merely expressing themselves in a rough way on social media. And I saw the Director of Public Prosecutions for the United Kingdom say that you can be jailed for tweeting or retweeting something, even if your intentions are good, if it's, quote, likely to have the effect of inciting racial tension. What does that mean, likely to? That's a future tense crime. And there's no mental element. We believe that crimes need to have a criminal act, but also a criminal line. That's the difference between an accident and a homicide, let's say. But in the United Kingdom, they are jailing people now simply for tweeting things that may cause other people to have hard feelings. It's not even a thought crime, it's a feelings crime. There was a judge in Northern Ireland who said that merely going to watch with eager curiosity a riot could get you jailed as well. But it isn't any journalist, just a curious bystander. I think shocking things are happening in the United Kingdom, but as I look at the words by the Director of Public Prosecutions, by the judges, and televising the judges meeting on these sentences, and I've never seen faster trials in my life. You know, they're arrested, tried, and jailed within hours. Within hours. I don't understand it. This from the country from whose legacy our law has emanated. This is the place where freedom of speech really was at its most robust. We inherited their system of law. To this day, British decisions they're not binding on Canada, but they're certainly are given consideration. And so I look at what's been going on in the UK. Certainly two-tier justice, which is an accusation put against Keir Starmer, that there are other, for example, pro-Hamas hate marchers saying atrocious and shocking things likely to incite hatred. I don't believe that there's been a single prosecution or jailing under those offenses, so you see the two-tier nature when you have such a vague offense. But my point about this is not to talk about the UK, it's to say that everything I've just described is contained in Justin Trudeau's new bill called C-63. And so for my remaining 15 minutes, I want to tell you what's in C-63, in case you haven't looked at it. Justin Trudeau cares more about censorship than he cares about any other issue in Canada, if you measure by the legislative energy he's put into it. He's had 3 bills in this in Parliament about censoring the internet. C-11, which gave him dominion over the internet. The CRTC, which used to just apply to radio and TV, under C-11, it applies to the internet as well. It was opening the door to regulation of the internet, which had theretofore been free. It also gives him the power to order large internet companies like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, etc., to alter the, quote, discoverability of any item in their search engines. So Justin Trudeau, through the CRTC, could order Google, for example, or YouTube, the second largest search engine in the world, to boost or throttle news sources that the government chooses. I wonder what they'll do to Rebel News. That's in C-11. C-18 was a law that's passed that basically grabs big tech companies, wrings them out, and apportions those funds to who Trudeau's Canada Revenue Agency deems to be a qualified Canadian journalism organization, QCJO. In Canada now, you have to apply to the government for a form of a journalism license. Yeah, you can still do journalism without that license, as we do. But if you have the QCJO news license that is handed out by a hand-picked committee that Trudeau appointed, an advisory committee to the CRA. If you get that QCJO status, you get a lot of things. You get instant accreditation to any government press conference. All right, well, we'll scrum them outside. You saw me with Albert Bourla. You get access to millions of dollars in government funding. Well, Rebels would never take that, but others do. You get to offer a tax credit to people who have a subscription, a digital subscription. So our subscribers cannot get tax relief for subscribing, whereas a QCJO government journalism licensed news source can. Now, none of those things really bother me, because none of those things will stop me from operating. But the last one, again, is the most terrifying, is that the QCJO becomes a mark that can then be outsourced to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., and they can be directed through C11 or other instruments to instruct YouTube to hide non-QCJO journalism in the name of misinformation or disinformation, or it's not a quality source of information. So Justin Trudeau doesn't have to pass a law banning Rebel News. He doesn't have to be that clumsy. He tried that before, when his hand-picked staff banned Rebel News from attending the leaders' debates in 2019 and again in 2021. We went to the federal court and beat him twice. He doesn't have to be so clumsy anymore. He doesn't have to say our name anymore when he goes to ban us. He can simply have the CRTC issue an order to YouTube, Facebook, etc., to say any unqualified and untrusted media should be deboosted, throttled, shadow banned, and boost the good stuff. And by good, of course, we mean the licensed stuff, the QCJO journalism that has all those other benefits too. Justin Trudeau can outsource censorship to the big tech companies, and we know that's been going on. C11 gave him dominion over the internet. C18 allowed him to parcel out hundreds of millions of dollars to his favorite news outlets. But nothing comes close to C63, his new bill called the Online Harms Act. I should tell you that 3 bills, Justin Trudeau does not have 3 bills on inflation. He does not have 3 laws that he's passed on Ukraine and Russia. He does not have 3 laws on the cost of housing. The thing that animates him the most, that he cares about the most, that his legislators are attending to the most, is censorship. And C63 is astonishing. By the way, the Justice Minister, he has it in title. I was astonished to see this. I was surprised to see this. I bet you might not even know this. The Justice Minister, Arif Virani, now has a second official title. He is the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Online Harms. The Minister of Justice is in charge of literally hundreds of laws. But the only law I am aware of that is now an official title that he carries, Minister of Online Harms, is a censorship law. Do you think perhaps that indicates his dedication and passion to getting censorship through? I think it certainly does. So what is this C63? Well, I know a little bit about part of it firsthand. You saw me quarreling with the Alberta Human Rights Commission when I was charged more than a dozen years ago under the Alberta Human Rights Code for publishing something, quote, likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. I memorized it still. I know the exact wording. When you put through the ringer for 900 days, you remember the wording of the law. I published something likely to, so again, future tense. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It hasn't happened yet, we don't know. Likely to. Now, there's some likely to offenses in the law. I bring a threat. That's a conspiracy to commit. That's a future tense crime. But that's the key. A crime likely to what? Likely to punch someone in the nose? That's a real crime. No, likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. So you're saying something that might cause him to have a hard feeling about him. So it's not even an objective thing that can be measured. And by the way, you'll notice that likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt, it's got nothing to do with the truth. What's the truth got to do with it? You did something likely to expose a person to hatred or contempt. In defamation law, truth is a defense. Fair comment is a defense. There are defenses in other laws where censorship is a bit of a factor, but not in the Alberta Human Rights Code under which I was prosecuted. Stephen Harper repealed that wording of the federal law when he was Prime Minister. Bill C-63 reintroduces the very law I was prosecuted under in Alberta, but reintroduces it even more weaponized. The language is slightly different now. It's likely to expose a person to detestation or vilification. I don't know what difference that possibly means. But again, it's a subjective test. There are no defenses of truth or fair comment or religious opinion or anything like that. But here's what's worse about it. When I was put through the Human Rights Commission more than a dozen years ago, I suppose the worst that could have happened was that the individual who took me to the Human Rights Commission could get some cash from me. And I mean, in fact, they tried to shake me down for it. But Justin Trudeau has added something new. He has added a bounty. Anyone in Canada, maybe anyone in the world, it doesn't say citizens, it just says anyone, can bring a complaint to the Human Rights Commission, and if the complaint is upheld, the person against whom you complain can be ordered to pay the complainant $20,000 per incident. Now, the complainant doesn't have to be a victim. The complainant doesn't have to have any standing. The complainant can be a complainer of fortune, a hobbyist, a busybody, a complainer who has decided to go into the very profitable business about filing vexatious complaints. And if you filed, I don't know, 100 a month, and even if only one or two of your torpedoes found the mark, that's a pretty good living. So instead of actually having someone who is aggrieved going to this kangaroo court, now we're basically turning the entire, I don't know, comments section of Facebook, instead of just griping at you harmlessly online, they can now file their gripes to the Human Rights Commission, which will take them, using taxpayers' expenses against your enemy, and you can actually pay these people a $20,000 bounty that's in the new version of the law, in addition to up to a $50,000 per incident fine to the government. So Jordan Peterson, for example, the guy publishes a tweet several times a day, he does a video several times a week. Every single one of those instances could be a thought crime. And the law specifically says that you can go back in time as well. Bill C-63 specifically says if there is anything online, could be 10 years old, could be 15 years old, if you have the power to delete it today, if it's still under your control, you are liable for it, even if you wrote it when you were a kid. Bill C-63 not only pays people to file complaints, it allows people to go back through your old catalog. You can sit down and say, I'm going to take on everything that Jordan Peterson has said since he became a famous public intellectual, and I'm just going to file these by the 100, by the 1,000, why not? And you're not going to believe this, but I promise you it's true. You can look it up if you doubt me. The complainant can have their identity kept secret. You can make a secret complaint. You can give secret evidence. The ability to challenge your accuser, to face your accuser, is an ancient right. And you need to be able to say to the judge, oh, well, that's a disgruntled ex-employee, or that's my ex-wife there, or that's my rival business partner, or that's my egregious neighbor. You need to know who it is who's making a complaint against you. You need to tell the judge. You need to being able to face and name your accuser is an essential part of the law. Even in mafia trials, the mafia have the right to look in the eye of the accuser, however terrifying that is, but not under C-63. You can have entire industries of complainers of fortune operating secretly and silently. That's in C-63. This is the law that is being used to jail people in the United Kingdom merely for retweeting someone else's post. And what are they jailing people for in the UK right now? Simply showing people the race riots in the UK. Now, it's an unhappy thing to look at, but it is a fact. But being a true fact, showing the true fact of a race riot in the UK, truth is not a defense, I tell you. If the government thinks that showing the truth of a race riot can cause you to have hard feelings about you, that is the only test necessary. And if you look at the astonishing punishments meted out in the UK, the jail sentences they're giving out are more than 2 years. More than 2 years in prison. This is being cheered on by the bulk of the media. And by the way, you can't put this all at the foot of the Labour Party. They've only been in office since they won the election on July 4th. For the 14 years preceding that, the United Kingdom was ruled by a Conservative Party. The United Kingdom, from which we inherited so many of our liberties, including from the Magna Carta, is going the way of tyranny. If this were happening in Vladimir Putin's Russia, we would squawk about it. Konstantin Kisin has this wonderful clip, I don't know if you've seen it. He said, I suppose this is a couple of years old now, he said in 1 year, there were, I think he said 400 people arrested for social media posts in Russia. In the same year, I think the statistic was 3,300 in the United Kingdom. They're boasting, the Metropolitan Police is boasting that they have police doing nothing but scouring the internet. I don't know if you know about the city of Rotherham, UK, about 100,000 people. In that one city, 1,400 Indigenous British girls were raped. The city of 100,000, they weren't just raped once, they were raped repeatedly and methodically and systematically by rape gangs. They're, by the way, talking about that in the wrong way can get you charged and sentenced as well. But the rapists who have been prosecuted have served shorter prison terms than the hate crime of talking about them. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this because Justin Trudeau sees how eagerly the establishment in British society is accepting this. What Daniel Pex calls the 5 Ps, the press, the politicians, the police, the professors. Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the last P. Did I say the police? Police, professors, politicians. I think I've forgotten a P in there somehow. The establishment, the entire establishment, all the authority. I haven't seen a counter, I certainly haven't seen the Tory opposition in the UK stand up to this. In Canada, the C-63, I noticed that it was introduced right after Justin Trudeau solidified his coalition with Jagmeet Singh. He waited until it was strong and revived before announcing online contact. And the Bloc Québécois supports it as well. If it gets into Parliament, it absolutely will pass into law, both in the House and the Senate. And do you think for a minute they won't enforce it? Did you see who Trudeau appointed to be the chief of the Canadian Human Rights Commission? His name was Bertu Jatani, and he was using his other name, Mujahid Jatani, to write about how terrorism is a wise strategy to go after the Jews. That's his chief hate finder general. I suppose in a way he's ultimately qualified. He knows it very intimately. He finally resigned the other day. Do you doubt that they mean it? Do you doubt that they'll come for you? There's one more thing about C-63, and I want to wrap up soon because I want to be conscious of the time. I told you about the Human Rights Commission side of things, and that's the side most likely to hit journalists and political activists. But there is a provision in C-63 that is so astonishing. Again, I think you'll doubt me. I think you'll doubt that this is real. There is a criminal provision in C-63 that you can go before a judge, and if you convince the judge that someone out there has not committed a hate crime against you yet, but you just know in your bones that they're gonna. They haven't done it yet. This is like that movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where the pre-cogs, in the Department of Pre-Crime, they have this imagination where they swoop in to arrest someone right before it was a great dystopian movie based on the book by Philip Dick. In C-63, they have that. It's a little less sexy. You go before a judge, and if you can convince them that someone is likely to do something hatey towards you, there's this whole laundry list of things that the judge can order against the would-be, could-be future hater. House arrest, a list of people that cannot be contacted, a list of places that cannot be gone to, no alcohol, no drugs, and to back that up, blood and urine tests, no firearms, an ankle bracelet. This is all listed in there, not for a violent crime, not for a crime of violence, but for the crime of hate. What? Hate is a normal human emotion. If you never feel hate, you don't have a normal, healthy personality. The challenge of being a grown-up and not a 2-year-old is if you hate something, not to act out violently, to transmogrify that feeling of hate into something positive. Build a skyscraper with that feeling. Campaign for political change with that feeling. You can't stop people from hating just by telling them not to hate. That's like telling your wife you're arguing with, oh, just calm down. I don't think that works. I don't think that works. I think that makes things less calm. Just stop being so hating. The thing about hate is it often comes from an underlying feeling of grievance. And maybe the grievance is not well-founded, and maybe the grievance is exaggerated. But unless you deal with the underlying grievance, or at least allow someone to talk about their grievance, you are not going to deal with the hate any more than passing the Love Each Other Act would command people to love. That's not how people work. And I think one of the purposes of the crackdown in the United Kingdom is to get people so afraid of speaking out and so afraid of expressing their grievances that they stop tweeting, that they stop talking about it. But I saw a poll just 2 days ago in the United Kingdom that fully 35% of Brits now think that violence and riot is on the table as a legitimate way to respond to issues in the UK like mass immigration. That is a terrible thing, that a third of Brits believe in violence, according to this poll, if you trust this poll. And that is because they see that the political class, rather than paying attention to their grievances, labels them fascist far-right haters and prosecutes them and jails them with a speed and a zeal that they've never seen before in the crime wave in the UK, including the mass rapes. And the thing is, if you shut people up, if you say you can't vent peacefully with your words, well, that was a pressure valve, that was a release. And if you tell people they can't speak up, they can't even retweet an image, well, maybe they will, unfortunately, head towards violence. I'm worried about C-63 because every single thing Justin Trudeau has done in his 9 years as Prime Minister tells me he's absolutely dead serious about censorship. I'm worried about C-63 because I've seen how he has weaponized any other instruments that he has to silence people, including sometimes against rebel news. And I'm most worried about C-63 because I see how the establishment in the United Kingdom is completely fine with it. And I fear that in Canada they would be too. I ask you to remember that in the days after the Emergencies Act was invoked in Canada, the chief response from the Commentariat was, why aren't you going harder? Why aren't you going farther? Why aren't you arresting more? Why aren't you seizing more bank accounts? I challenge you to look at the newspaper columnists in the days after it, and there were a few calls to put on the brakes, but there were many more calls to step on the gas. When I was charged with violating the law for republishing the Danish cartoons of Mohammed over almost 2 decades ago now, a pollster named Compass did a survey of working journalists. So it wasn't even a poll. He called up actual working journalists. And 70% of working journalists back in 2008 agreed that not only should I have had my right to publish those Danish cartoons of Mohammed, but that indeed every media outlet in Canada should have published them as well. to normalize publishing them. 70% of journalists said that. Do you doubt that if that poll were done today, 70% of journalists would say, hang the witch? Do you doubt that 70% of journalists would say, throw the book at him, jail him? We've seen that kind of talk even in recent months. I've used up all my time, so I'm going to wrap up and say this. History is not destined to get better. We've had an anomaly over the generations, that things get better and better. We've had an anomaly of peace and prosperity and freedom. And I think it's, well, as the Yeats poem says, things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. And then the most terrifying part of that poem, if you know it, it's called The Second Coming. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. And it is my honor to stand with people who are the best and who are full of passionate intensity for freedom. We need more people like John Carpe and the Justice Center, and I hope everyone in this room will stand and fight for freedom in the months and years to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ezra, for fantastic remarks. C-63 is an issue of concern to the Justice Center as well. I was in Ottawa this past April. I was attending a conference, and the Justice Center set up a petition against C-63 shortly after the first reading, and quickly had over 50,000 signatures. I delivered those to the Prime Minister's office in April. We printed them off. They were online signatures, but we printed them off on hard copy paper. And if it goes through the second and third reading and goes into law, you can count on the Justice Center to be taking it to court. So we've got a few minutes. Independent media. I'm a huge fan. I always encourage people whenever I speak publicly at rallies and events and public meetings and so on, I say, spend $10 a month or $8 a month or whatever it is and support the groups like The Rebel and True North and the Epoch Times and the Western Standard and so on. Question for you, Ezra, where would Canada be today if we had not had independent media in the last 5 years?
I think the Canadians would have looked to other sources outside the country, perhaps. They would have looked to social media. But what's so incredible to me is the difference that Elon Musk has made by buying Twitter. And reviving a number of important Twitter accounts that were canceled just for political reasons. And the boldness with which he rebukes very senior politicians who seek to silence him, it's astonishing. Like to see him quarrel back and forth with Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, and to say two-tier Keir. That's sort of the critical nickname for Keir Starmer, the two-tier justice, two-tier sentencing. To see him engage like that, to see him engage with the President of the European Union by basically posting a meme with swears and not backing down, it's astonishing. When I was in Davos in January, the World Economic Forum, the #1 name on their lips that they had to stop was Donald Trump, because he was such a threat to their system. But a very close second was Elon Musk, because not only was he enabling Trump to get the message out, but he was allowing ordinary people to say things, react, and in a way that have been controlled. Just today, I received an email from YouTube telling me that 8 of my videos with Tommy Robinson were the British activist, where we were just, these included videos when he was in Canada, we were just talking about things. 8 of them have been essentially made extremely difficult to find, unshareable, like just this weird half censorship. And you know that would be happening on Twitter for Elon Musk. And so many things we would simply not know about. How would we know? I really think that Elon Musk is one of the most important people in the world, not just because of his industry as well, but because he alone is the reason we are able to learn things about the world and express ourselves. Right before he took over Twitter, one of their senior executives said, freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. And he said what he meant was, oh, you can go on Twitter and say anything. We'll just make it so no one sees that. You'll be shouting into an empty room. It'll feel like you have freedom of speech, but we're going to stop anyone else from hearing it. That was the ethos of Twitter. When he fired 80% of their staff and the product improved, it was clear that Twitter was actually a censorship machine, not a free speech machine. He fired all the soft, political people there, just kept the engineers.
We have so many threats to the free society. We've got the bill C-63 Online Harms Act. We've got school boards that are shutting down parents, taxpayers. We've got woke ideology that is spreading like a cancer and being imposed on people against their will. Of course, you and I are both free speech advocates, so if you want to advocate for woke, I support your right to preach that, to advocate for that, but we're in a situation where this ideology is being imposed on universities, corporations, school systems, etc. So many bad things going on. We've got a lot of young people that don't have a clue about the free society or Charter of Freedoms. What gives you hope? What keeps you going? Because you and I and everybody in this, we could all give up and quit because we could get so discouraged about some very real, very serious problems. What keeps you going? What motivates you to keep on fighting?
Well, I'll give you one example. When I get off of Twitter and go into the real world, when I go out onto the street, and when I encounter people, not just in Canada, but literally around the world, who recognize me and walk up to me and tell me something that we've done that was meaningful to them. I was in Geneva a couple of months ago for the pandemic treaty, and I just encountered someone just on the shore who wanted to talk to me about that outward world interview. Just anywhere in the world I go. And it means I have to be on my best behavior wherever I can. I can't pick my nose or something. There's always someone watching me. But I was in Ireland. I went to Ireland for the first time a few months ago. I'd never been there. We've never done any stories about Ireland before. And I tell you, 30 people came up to us over the course of a couple of days to talk about stories we had done that thematically were important to them. I couldn't believe it. I have no connection to Ireland whatsoever. And so the fact that you would think, judging by my Twitter feed, that stepping out of my house is a torrent of hatred. But I have to tell you, I've got some kids that are a little bit older now, but when we would just go for a walk, they didn't understand who their dad was. They thought I was some sort of, it was just positive. They just got a real chuckle about how positive it was. I would think if Twitter were real life, that they would be shamed and they would be embarrassed. It was sort of the opposite. Only now do they realize who their dad is. They thought I was some sort of rock star. That's my way of saying, don't believe the official curated opinion. Just because all the establishment fancy people say it doesn't mean it's true. I don't know if that's a real answer to your question, but it actually is very true. When I go I mean, this is a gathering of people who are freedom-oriented, so I'm gonna feel at home here. But I'm talking about severely normal, ordinary people you just bump into on the street. When I hear their feedback, I know what we're doing is right. And another measurement is the case for you. I want to give a shout out to our members table there, especially with Drea Humphrey, who's on the stand up and give us a quick wave, isn't she? And I want to mention Alex Yelazara, who doesn't get FaceTime on the channel, but he writes a lot about it. And what I was going to say is, we're funded almost completely by email and crowdfunding, because we're cut off by social media ads, and we don't take government money. And in a way, that's a measurement too. If we seek to fight a big battle and we need 50 grand for lawyers, and if we raise 50 grand, that tells me that I'm not wrong. That tells me that what we're doing is valuable. And so the responses we get when we ask for help, that's another way that I'm encouraged. And so I actually am at the point now, and our audience is so huge now because Twitter's taken the yoke off. I mean, I actually don't even care what the mainstream media says, because believe it or not, we're bigger than that. I mean, in the month of February 2022, which was the key convo month, that was the Emergencies Act month, on Twitter alone, between my account and the company account and Sheila's account, we had 400 million views and impressions in 1 month. The CBC says that on any average month, they have 360 million. It might have been bigger that month for them too. But, so I don't feel that inferiority complex. I don't absorb and internalize the hate from the mainstream media, and literally every week, another mainstream media outlet closes. And I don't have schadenfreude over it. I'm not gleeful when they're fired, even though they were gleeful when the Alberta Report shut down, when Sun News Network shut down. I don't feel that towards them. I don't even care. I don't even think about them that much.
Add to that, one thing that encourages me is that when you do what is right, when you speak the truth, or you do the best you can to speak what you believe to be the truth, but when you speak truth and when you try to practice courage, there are good effects. You just don't always know what they are or when they're going to happen. I was very fortunate to be able to travel in the mid-80s, 1984. I traveled behind the Iron Curtain. I was in Poland, and I had some pen pals there. And I don't know why or how I got in. I just I applied for a visa, and I was allowed to go behind the Iron Curtain, and I was in Poland. And I went there a second time. It was December of 1987. And Gorbachev was in power. Some of the older people in the room, you remember Gorbachev with his Glasnost, transparency, and perestroika, restructuring. And it was Christmas 1987. And so my Polish friends that I was with, they spoke English, but they also translated when I was talking to different people. Everybody said, nothing has changed, nothing can change, nothing will change. Communists are firmly entrenched. They're not going to give up their power, their privileges. They're benefiting from the status quo. There will not be. Nothing has changed, nothing can change, nothing will change. This is what people were saying in December 1987. And everybody believed we would have communist tyranny in power in the Soviet Union and all the satellite countries for decades and decades to come. Lo and behold, 2 years later, not a very long time, right, when you look at the broader picture of history, 2 years later, free elections in Poland and the collapse of the evil empire, the Soviet Union. And this was a result of people, there's a great book by Rod Dreher, Live Not by Lies. Has anybody heard of that book? Yes, I see a few hands. So that's what we need to keep on doing, is speaking truth to power and practicing the virtues of courage and perseverance. And we don't know exactly what's going to happen 12 months, 24 months from now, but we do know generally, if we keep on practicing courage, practicing perseverance, speaking truth, fighting for freedom, resisting tyranny, if we keep on doing the right thing, it will pay off. And so we got to keep on going. Final word to you. What advice do you have for everybody in the room tonight in terms of what people can do to fight for the free society, and whatever other closing comments you want to make, and then I'll have a brief closing announcement. So the floor is yours.
Well, what was it that the Polish Pope, John Paul II, said when he finally went to Warsaw for his million-person mass? It was really the spark to throw off the yoke of the Soviets. He said, "Be not afraid." Now, easier said than done, but if you make the decision not to be afraid, I think that's the first step. Let me tell you about something that we talked about at Rebel News maybe 10 times during the lockdown, and Alex will remember this. And I played a little video for everybody in the office. Has anyone here heard of the Ash conformity test? I think it's one of the most important psychological experiments I've ever seen. You can find it on YouTube very quickly. Ash is spelled A-S-C-H. It's Professor Solomon Ash. It's sort of related to the Milgram experiments that are also fascinating. The Ash conformity test was a series of subjects in a row, and they were given a childlike test. The instructor would hold up a card with a line on it of a certain length, and then he would hold up another card with 3 lines of different lengths, and he would say, which of these 3 lines is the same length as this line? Like, it really was something that an 8-year-old could do. And there was like six people in a row, and they had to go one after the other and say which of these 3 lines was the same length as that line, and then they would have a new card. But here's the trick. Only 1 out of the 6 people was naive. The other 5 were in on it with Professor Ash. So the first time they went down, which line is it? 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, which line? 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. But then the next one on cue, they all gave the wrong answer. Wrong, 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 wrong. And then they went to the naive person who wasn't in on it. And the test was, would he say the right answer, or would he go along with the wrong answer? And Professor Ash said there was 2 reasons why people would go with the wrong answer. One is they would doubt that they were right. They would say, well, maybe I don't see it correctly, and maybe they're right and I'm wrong, I'll just go along with it. And that's actually a fair reason to do that. If you genuinely doubt yourself, okay, then, but the worst answer was, I know they're wrong, I know I'm right, but I don't want to make a fuss. I don't want to be the skunk at the garden party. And I think, going from memory, I think it was 35% of the time, people went with the pack, even when they knew the pack was wrong.
Yeah.
But Ash had a variation on his test, and Alex, correct me if I'm misremembering this. He gave the naive subject a Confederate who would also say the right answer. So they would be wrong, wrong, right, wrong, wrong, and then they would get to the naive person. And conformity fell, I think, to 5%. Just having one other person speak the truth gave the naive subject confidence. Because remember, they had to say all these things out loud. There were other variations where you would write it down privately. But saying something out loud that you know most people are against, conformity fell, it plunged if there was just one other voice. And during the darkest times, at Rebel News, during the lockdowns, during COVID, during the trucker times, we knew and we said to ourselves that our role was to be proof that other people are not alone, proof that you're not alone, proof that you're not crazy, proof that other people do, that there was a false consciousness of unanimity. When all 5 party leaders in 2021 agreed on everything contentious, when all the media, when all the professors, when all the pop culture, the 5 Ps, when they all agreed, no, that was false. There were dissonance, and you could know that because there was this scrabbly little rebel news out there. And so I would say to you that if it's at your workplace, if it's your family, wherever you are, if you show the leadership of being a contrarian, not just to be contrary, not for contrariness' sake, but if you know there's something true out there that you have to speak in the face of a wall of lies, you have no idea how many other people were just waiting for your leadership. We're just waiting to know it's okay to speak. And John was one of the very first voices to express skepticism of the lockdowns and the forced nature of that time. It was the hardest time to be the first, but that's the most important time. Anyways, I've talked far too much tonight, but thank you for your hospitality.
Thank you. Big round of applause.